My husband called me nothing for years, then begged me back after I took everything. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. It started on a Tuesday, a regular day. I was folding his shirts, same as always, when he looked at me and said, "You're nothing without me." No emotion, just calm, cold words that cut deeper than a scream ever could. He didn't even glance up, like it was just a passing thought, like I should already know it. I didn't respond, not because I agreed, but because I felt something shift. Something small inside me stirred. Not anger, not sadness, just awareness. I had heard worse before, cruel comments, little jabs, looks that made me feel small, but this one stuck. It echoed. He believed it. That was the difference. And maybe I had started to believe it too. Over time, I'd stopped looking in mirrors. I'd stopped calling friends. I even stopped dreaming. My world had become so small, built entirely around his needs, his moods, his routine. My name, my voice, my joy faded. But something about that moment changed things. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just kept folding his shirts, but my mind started moving. Quietly, carefully, something woke up. I started seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Not as a partner, not as the man I married, but as someone who had slowly taken pieces of me until I didn't recognize myself. For 10 years, I let him define my worth. I adjusted. I stayed quiet. I convinced myself that being needed was enough, that I could survive off crumbs of attention and hollow apologies. But the truth? I wasn't living. I was existing in someone else's shadow. That Tuesday, his words didn't destroy me. They freed me. Because once you realize someone doesn't see your value, you get to decide whether you still care. I didn't. So I smiled softly, not for him, but for me. He had no idea what he'd just done. No idea that in trying to break me, he'd lit the fire that would rebuild me. He thought I had no options. He thought I'd stay no matter what. He thought he had time. But he was wrong. That day, I began to remember who I used to be, who I still was deep down. I started planning, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect, out of hope. Quietly, I prepared for the day I'd leave. And when I did, I wouldn't just walk, I would rise. He called me nothing. So I became everything he was afraid of. It didn't happen all at once. There was no big blow-up, no clear moment where things turned cruel. It was slow, subtle, like water wearing down stone. A constant drip of tiny comments that didn't seem like much, until they were all I could hear. "You're lucky I put up with you," he'd say with a half smile, usually after I made a small mistake. If I forgot to buy his favorite cereal, if dinner wasn't warm enough, if I didn't laugh at one of his jokes. It wasn't shouted, just said plainly, as if it were a simple truth. Other times it was, "No one else would want you." That one hurt in a different way. It didn't matter how I looked that day, or how hard I had worked to please him. It was never enough. He made sure I believed I had no other option, that he was doing me a favor just by staying. At first, I tried to argue back. "That's not fair," I'd say. Or, "Don't talk to me like that." But over time, I stopped. What was the point? The more I pushed, the colder he got. The colder he got, the more I shrank. He said these things like he was reading lines from a script he'd memorized. They came between moments that should have been safe, passing the salt, watching a movie, brushing teeth. I started to brace myself in everyday moments, waiting for the next little jab. It was never predictable, and that made it worse. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. He just chipped away, slowly, like termites eating through a house from the inside. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet, invisible damage. I started questioning everything. Was I really too emotional? Too needy? Not smart enough? Not pretty anymore? I stopped seeing friends. I avoided phone calls. I didn't want anyone asking how I was doing, because I didn't know how to answer without falling apart. The world saw smiles and photos, polite conversations at parties. We looked normal. I played the part well. But inside, I felt hollow, weak, like something had been carved out of me, and I didn't even know when it started. I forgot what it felt like to feel proud of myself. I forgot how to trust my own thoughts. He convinced me I was nothing special. And worse, I believed him. That was the power of his words. Not the volume, the precision. He didn't need to scream. He just had to repeat the same story until I started living in it. And that's how I disappeared, one sentence at a time. It started with small things. He never told me not to see my friends, but every time I made plans, he had a reason why I shouldn't. "They just want to talk about drama," he'd say. Or, "Don't you think it's weird how they're still single?" Somehow, every friend I had was either too loud, too messy, or a bad influence. Eventually, I stopped calling them. It felt easier that way. When I mentioned wanting a girls' night, he'd smirk. "What? You want to go drink and flirt with strangers?" It wasn't said as a joke. There was always suspicion hiding underneath. I found myself explaining, defending, apologizing for wanting normal things, for wanting connection. He never outright banned me from seeing my sister, but whenever I brought her up, he'd change the subject or roll his eyes. She thinks she's better than everyone, he'd mumble. Slowly, I stopped talking about her. Then I stopped seeing her. I didn't want to deal with the tension that followed every visit. Even his praise was a trap. "You're lucky I let you stay home," he told me once while watching TV. Most women would kill to relax all day. It wasn't said with love. It was a reminder that I had no income, that my comfort came from him, that I needed him more than he needed me. At first, I believed him. I told myself I was fortunate, that he was just protective, that maybe I was too social, too naive, too dependent on others. I thought this was how love worked, two people becoming each other's whole world. I didn't see the danger in that. Not then. But love isn't supposed to feel like a locked room. And over time, I realized I was alone in ways that had nothing to do with distance. My phone stopped ringing. I had no one to talk to but him, and he didn't really talk. He spoke, yes. Gave opinions. Gave commands. But he never listened. The house got quieter. So did I. I forgot how to laugh the way I used to. I forgot the warmth of conversations that didn't feel like walking through a minefield. I missed my sister. I missed my friends. I missed me. And still, I told myself it was normal. That maybe this was just what marriage looked like after a few years. But eventually, the silence grew louder than his words. Louder than the excuses I whispered to myself at night. And when silence starts to scream, it's no longer something you can ignore. It was supposed to be a normal evening. Just a few friends, some wine, easy conversation. I cooked, cleaned, made sure everything looked perfect, like I always did. He liked it that way. Liked when people thought we were the couple who had it all together. Dinner was going fine until someone made a joke about aging. That's when he jumped in, smiling, glass in hand. "Well, she used to be pretty. Before the kids." They laughed. All of them. Maybe it was awkward laughter, maybe polite. I couldn't tell. I smiled too, because that's what I'd trained myself to do. Keep the peace. Pretend it's funny. Pretend it doesn't hurt. But it did. It was the way he said it. So casual, like it didn't matter. Like it was true. Like I wasn't sitting right there. And maybe worse than what he said was the feeling that no one thought twice about it. That the people who were supposed to care about me didn't even flinch. I smiled through the rest of the night. Washed the dishes. Said goodnight to guests. Let him fall asleep beside me without a word. Then I went into the bathroom and looked at myself. It had been a long time since I really looked. The woman in the mirror wasn't the same one I remembered. There were lines on my face I didn't recognize. My eyes looked tired, worn. But under all of that, there was a flicker of something. A spark. I leaned closer, whispering so quietly it was almost a thought. "You're still in there. Somewhere." It was the gentlest thing I'd said to myself in years. I stood there for a long time. Not crying. Not angry. Just still. Letting it all sink in. Not just the joke. Not just that night. But everything that came before it. The years of little cuts, cold glances, heavy silences. The feeling of fading. Of being taken for granted. And then made fun of on top of it. He didn't cheat. He didn't hit. But something broke that night. Something I didn't think could be fixed. I didn't fall out of love with him in that moment. That had been happening slowly, without me knowing it. But that was the night I realized. The night I finally stopped lying to myself. And I knew, whatever happened next, it had to be different. Because I couldn't keep loving someone who thought I was a joke. And I couldn't keep being someone who let him. He sat on the couch scrolling his phone, thinking I was lost in Pinterest recipes or home decor board. What he didn't know was that I had 3 browser tabs hidden behind one quick swipe. Divorce laws in our state, financial independence tips, and a private message thread with an old college friend who now worked in legal aid. By then, I wasn't trying to fix us. I wasn't hoping for change. I was building a way out, quietly, carefully, and with every detail accounted for. I opened a separate bank account in a credit union he didn't even know existed. Transferred tiny amounts from grocery money or birthday cash I received from relatives. Small enough not to raise a flag. Large enough to matter. I started walking in the mornings, saying I needed fresh air. In truth, I needed phone time, away from his ears, away from his questions. That's when I'd make calls, watch videos about legal prep, and remind myself that this wasn't just survival anymore. It was strategy. Every date night was an act. I smiled when I needed to, played the good wife in public. I kept the peace, never hinting that anything was wrong. Because I needed time. Time to gather proof. Time to make copies. Time to prepare without setting off alarms. I learned how to download bank statements, print insurance records, back up text messages. I stored everything on a USB I hid inside an old mascara tube. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. He didn't notice the shift. Or maybe he did, but thought it was just another phase. He still talked down to me, still threw little insults wrapped in jokes. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just listened, nodded, and took mental notes. Everything he said became part of my case. I reconnected with people he'd driven away. My sister, old friends, even a therapist I hadn't spoken to in years. Slowly, I rebuilt a quiet support system, one that existed outside his control. This wasn't an emotional escape. This was a blueprint. Revenge, maybe, but not the screaming, dramatic kind. The kind you build piece by piece with documents, passwords, and locked drawers. He thought I was wasting time on the internet, that I was still stuck, still small. But I was sharpening every edge he'd dulled over the years, preparing for the moment when I would leave and take my freedom with me. No warning, no second chances, only a goodbye letter and a list of everything I took. Back. The U-Haul was parked in the driveway before the sun came up. I had already been awake for hours, double-checking the list, running through every step in my head like a script I'd rehearsed for. The kids were dressed, backpacks ready, quiet but wide-eyed. They didn't fully understand, but they knew enough. We were leaving. For good. He was out of town, speaking at some conference where he liked to play the role of the charming husband. He'd be gone for 3 days. I had 72 hours. That was the window. I knew his schedule better than he did. I chose this weekend with purpose. Every box was labeled. Important documents, kids' clothes, keepsakes. Nothing unnecessary came with us. Just what mattered. Just what was mine. The movers came right on time. People I'd hired through a friend under a fake name. Cash payment. No paper trail. I wasn't going to let one mistake blow this. I walked through each room one last time. Not with sadness, but with clarity. This house wasn't a home. It was a cage dressed in neutral tones and fake smiles. I paused in the kitchen, where he used to drop casual insults over coffee. I looked at the dented wall near the stairs, the one he never hit, but punched once to scare me. I saw everything clearly now. Not as memories, but as evidence. When we were done, I left one thing behind, a note. It sat on the kitchen counter, exactly where he always left his keys. "You were right," it read. "I was nothing. Now I'm free." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. By the time he landed and noticed the silence, he called. Then he texted. Then he called again. 17 times in total. I didn't answer a single one. My phone stayed off. My hands stayed steady. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't hiding. I was reclaiming. Reclaiming every breath I held in to avoid conflict. Every part of myself I shrunk to fit his comfort. Every dream I shelved. Every boundary I erased for his approval. We drove to a town 3 hours away. A small rental waited for us. Paid in advance under my new bank account. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The kids unpacked their things. I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes and silence. But this silence felt different. This silence was peaceful. This silence was mine. It was 2 weeks after I left when he finally found out where I was. I knew it was coming. I just didn't expect him to show up at my sister's house, looking like a ghost. He stood on the porch, holding nothing but a desperate expression. Eyes red, voice shaky. She called me to the door. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. "I'll change," he said. "I swear. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever you want." I stood still. "I miss you. I need you. Please don't throw this away." His voice cracked. He stepped forward, like he might fall if I didn't catch him. But I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. He kept going. "I was wrong. About everything. You weren't nothing. I was. I ruined it." I believed he meant it. I really did. But not because he suddenly loved me more. He was scared, and not of losing a wife. He was scared of losing control. For the first time, he wasn't the one with the upper hand. He wasn't in charge. He couldn't twist my words or confuse me with guilt. For the first time, I saw what he looked like without the power. And he looked small. He offered money. A bigger house. A fresh start. "We can fix this," he said, reaching for my hand. "Just come home." I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I didn't give him the dramatic reaction he probably expected. Instead, I looked him in the eyes and said, "You don't miss me. You miss the version of me who stayed silent." That was it. One sentence. That's all I needed to say. He didn't know what to do after that. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was. Maybe he finally realized that the woman standing in front of him wasn't afraid anymore. There were no second chances. No long talks. No drawn-out fights. I turned around, walked back inside, and closed the door behind me. He didn't follow. He knew it was over. That moment didn't feel like revenge. It felt like freedom. Pure, steady, quiet freedom. I didn't win by yelling louder or breaking down. I won by standing tall. By choosing myself. By saying no and meaning it. At first, I didn't know what to do with all the space. The silence felt too big. But instead of running from it, I leaned in. I used it. Every quiet moment became a chance to rebuild. I started small. Freelancing from my laptop during nap time. Writing blog posts, designing graphics, helping small businesses with their branding. I taught myself how to market, how to pitch, how to ask for more than I thought I deserved. Every time I doubted myself, I remembered his words. You're not smart enough to work. Those words didn't break me anymore. They built fire. Within months, I had real clients. I wasn't just staying afloat. I was growing. Then came the consulting. People started asking for advice. Other women, new business owners. They wanted help, and they wanted me. Me, the woman who used to be too quiet, too small, too scared. I said yes. I shared my story once. Just once. A long, honest post about what I'd been through and what I'd done to get out. I almost deleted it, but I didn't. And it exploded. The messages poured in. Women telling me they saw themselves in my words. Strangers asking for coaching, guidance, mentorship. I realized my story wasn't just pain. It was a blueprint. A bridge for others. Soon, I was speaking at events. Then online summits. Then panels. I got invited to podcasts, webinars, interviews. Brands reached out. Collaborations. Partnerships. Checks with more zeros than I'd ever imagined. I was no longer a shadow in someone else's home. I was the woman at the front of the room, with a microphone in hand and confidence in her spine. He saw it too. Somehow, he always saw what I was doing. He watched the videos, liked the photos, tried to start conversations in the name of co-parenting. But it didn't matter. He used to control the money. Now he sends court-ordered child support while I run a six-figure business on my own term. He once said I'd be nothing without him, that no one would take me seriously, that I wasn't enough. Now I get paid to teach others how to leave people like him behind. I didn't just recover. I rose. And every dollar I earn, every hand I lift, every voice I help amplify, it's all proof that nothing is exactly what I needed to become everything he never believed I could be. The last time I saw him in person was in a quiet lawyer's office on a rainy Thursday. I had dressed simply, neat, calm, collected. He looked the opposite. His tie was crooked, his eyes swollen, his hands fidgeting with the edge of a manila folder. He couldn't even meet my eyes at first. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I miss what we had, he said. I let the words sit between us for a moment. They were soft, sad, rehearsed. But not real. Not to me. I looked at him and said gently, you don't miss me. You miss controlling me. He blinked, caught off guard. Maybe he expected anger. Maybe even hope. But I had none of that left for him. Just clarity. Silence filled the space. Not tense, not dramatic. Just final. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it. What could he say? He knew it was true. I stood up. No shouting. No last-minute scenes. Just peace. Before I left, I turned to him and said, tell your next partner she's everything, or you'll lose her too. That was the last thing I ever said to him. I walked out of the office with my head high and my heart still. No tears. No regrets. I didn't need him to apologize again. I didn't need validation or closure from someone who once made me question my own. Closure came the day I stopped hoping he'd change. He used to own my time, my voice, my choices. Now he sat alone in a room where every decision had already been made. The papers were signed. The path was clear. He was the past, and I was no longer living there. Outside, the rain had eased into a soft drizzle. I took a long breath, let the air fill my lungs, and stepped into my future. I never looked back, not because it didn't hurt once, but because healing taught me something better was always waiting. This story isn't really about getting even. It's not about hurting someone back or proving a point. It's about something deeper, something quieter. It's about coming home to the person I forgot I was. I spent years bending, shrinking, holding back just to keep someone else comfortable. I said yes when I wanted to say no. I stayed small so he could feel big. I believed that keeping the peace was more important than being myself. But deep down, I always knew something wasn't right. There are so many women who know that feeling. The slow fade of confidence. The way you question your thoughts. The way you stop dreaming. You don't even notice it happening at first. You just wake up one day and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. This story is for them. For every woman who was told she was too much, too emotional, too loud, too quiet, too difficult, too soft. For every woman who believed she had to earn love by being left. Because here's the truth. I was never nothing. I was just buried under the weight of someone else's fear. Fear that I might outgrow him. That I might find my voice. That I might stop needing his approval. He didn't lose me the day I packed my thing. He didn't lose me when I walked away. He lost me the day I realized I was worth more than staying. Once I saw that clearly, there was no turning back. I didn't become strong overnight. I became strong the moment I stopped trying to be who he wanted and started being who I was meant to be. And step by step, that woman came back. Not the old version. A better one. Wiser. Sharper. Braver. This wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. So if you're reading this and you feel stuck, unsure, or scared, know this, your power is still there. It never left. It's just waiting for you to stop dimming your light. You are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are not nothing. You are everything they were afraid you'd become once you remembered who you are. And once you do, there's no going back.